Hi friends, Audrey Henley here, and today we're talking about working with freelancers. So, a little bit of background about me. I work as a production assistant at a small to mid-sized publisher. And this publisher works mainly with nonfiction. But at the same time, I work a lot with freelancers, with freelance copy editors, proofreaders, typesetters, and cover designers. We essentially outsource almost all of that work to freelancers. And I know that we're not the only publisher to do this. Many smaller publishers, and even some of the big publishers, will hire freelancers. Freelancers are handy for when a publisher is a little swamped and not everyone in-house can deal with things. Or they might just use freelancers exclusively. There are very many freelance designers and typesetters and whatever. There are many freelancers who work with traditional publishers. And I think a lot of self-published or people who are looking to be self-published might not realize that. I believe that there are a lot of freelancers who aren't especially experienced or who are marketing themselves towards self-published authors. And I just wanted to have this video to go through my experience with freelancers, my experience with the traditional publishing process, and what it can teach people who've decided to self-publish about the publishing process and about working with freelancers. Did I go in a circle? I have experience creating books, and I think it could be helpful for self-published authors to know. When you become a self-published author, whether or not you make an LLC, you are essentially creating a publisher. You might only publish your own books. You are taking it upon yourself to be the whole business. You are writing the book. You are hiring anyone who needs to work on the book. You're creating a publishing house. And I think many self-published authors are not they don't quite think about all the production type work that has to go on to make a book that looks like any other book in Barnes & Noble. So this video is sort of for self-published authors. Another way to put it is this video is for people who are starting their own publishing house. How do you get your product to look like every other book in Barnes & Noble? I guess another caveat here is that this is for self-published authors who want a print book. They want a physical book that can go in bookstores, that people can hold in their hands, and not just Kindle. That's a perfectly valid choice, especially for some markets more than others. I don't think young adults like teens don't tend to read exclusively in ebooks, but there are some markets, especially I know, like when I'm gonna buy a romance novel, I buy it on my Kindle. I buy an ebook, like almost always. So that is definitely a valid strategy, but if you want to enter the print market at all, this video is for you. I want all self-published authors, all indie publishers to have a good idea of what they should expect from freelancers, because I think a lot of freelancers targeting self-published authors are taking advantage of the fact that self-published authors are new at publishing. They might not know all the ins and outs. So for me, I work at a traditional publisher and we've all worked on like dozens of books a year. We know what a copy editor is supposed to do. We know all the deliverables they're supposed to give us. And if they don't give them to us, we fire them and find another freelancer. But if you're a self-published author and this is your first time doing it, the pressure to find someone good is so hard. And unfortunately, I think a lot of these pretty unexperienced freelancers might overcharge. And I've seen a lot that sort of undercharge. They offer very cheap services, but at the same time, I'm wondering if they're giving the same deliverables. So this video is about the deliverables I see from freelancers in my work at a traditional press. In my opinion, self-published books and traditionally published books, you shouldn't be able to tell them apart. I mean, there's always going to be ways. If you have a book that you're doing print on demand, there's only so many print settings you can do. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you have to have a crappier looking cover design. That doesn't mean your back cover copy can't be spot on. It doesn't mean your typesetting is all over the place. I don't know, if you want a book that's going to look like any other books you see in the bookstore, that's fully achievable. There's this gap between freelancers who work with only publishers and freelancers who work only with self-published authors, and there's not a ton of overlap, but there should be, because at the end of the day, they're both putting out the same product. They're trying to put out a book you can sell in bookstores that looks nice, and that is a quality product. It's a shame that there's not more cross-marketing. I want to get into a little bit of the process, and let's say you have a manuscript and you have drafted it and you've gone through several rounds of revision. You've had beta readers and critique partners. You're on like draft 5 by now and you're like, okay, I'm feeling really good. This is a book that would really fit the self-published market. Like, I think it's a niche audience. I don't think like a traditional publisher would really pick it up, but there's definitely an audience, and with that higher margin that comes with self-publishing, I think, you know, it's a valid strategy. All of those thoughts, by the way, should be part of, when you decide to self-publish, don't just do it because you don't like querying. Do it because you have valid market reasons too. It's a business. Agents are going to ask about your publishing history, and if you have a book that sold 2 copies, that's going to look bad. So I'm just encouraging you to take self-publishing, really consider it a business move and consider it starting your own publishing company, because that's really what it is. Sorry, I'm getting backtracked so many times. I just have a lot of feelings, you guys. You've got this manuscript and you've polished it up and made it pretty, right? So now what do? Here's what 90% of self-published authors do. They use Amazon KDP. They try to format their novel in Microsoft Word or an even worse program, and they just stick it up there, slap a cover on it, and call it good. Don't do this. I get so upset, like, this is your baby, and so every part of the process should be precious. Take just as much care with your production process as you do with the writing process, because if your book looks crappy in print form, that you're the person to blame for that. So please take care of your baby. Take each step in the process seriously. Okay, so you've decided you're gonna do a little more TLC with your book before self-publishing. Okay, so you decide to hire freelancers. I guess before we talk about that, before we talk about hiring freelancers, I'll just quick touch on what I think is wise for a self-published authors to do themselves, because certainly you can skip some of the steps and you don't have to hire a freelancer like for everything that a traditional publisher would do for you. So first one is ebooks. I believe every self-published author can make ebooks by themselves. You don't have to hire someone to do that. It's pretty easy and self-explanatory. KDP will walk you through it, and some companies will charge ridiculous fees for getting it all set up. So do the setup for ebooks. Do that by yourself. That's my recommendation. Second is back cover copy, which you put on the back of your book. I think that's like a special thing with self-publishing, is you get to choose what that is. You can decide if you get a blurb, or if you do an excerpt, or if you write some really spiffy back cover copy. You could definitely do that yourself. I wouldn't pay someone else to write that. And I kind of already touched on this earlier, but all the setup stuff on KDP, even for the print version, and that's just like uploading the files, not creating the files. I would say you can do that yourself. And then marketing. So, and this is a personal opinion and I'm not super sure on it, so please leave in the comments if you disagree with me. But as far as I'm concerned, like as far as I know, there aren't really a ton of companies that offer quality marketing services for self-published authors. So I think a big part of being a self-published author is being savvy about the market and knowing the market, knowing where your readers are at. And so I would really suggest that you try to do your own marketing. Do your own social media stuff, do any ads you're going to do, Google ads, whatever, Facebook ads, Twitter ads. Do all that by yourself. Definitely do your research. feel like I haven't seen a lot of legitimate, helpful marketing services for self-published authors. Be wary of people promising to get your book in tons of hands. Yeah, I would say do that yourself. Okay, so that's all the stuff I think you can do yourself as a self-published author. And then all these steps I'm going to say now, you could potentially do typesetting yourself if you're willing to learn about typesetting, because it's a process and it's a skill. But you're a book nerd, you like how words look on the page, you might even be interested in it. Typesetting is fun, but it is a skill set. It's not, your book isn't a printed out Microsoft Word document, it's a typeset book. At least it should be. So you gotta take the time to learn about typesetting. So that's something I think you can do yourself, potentially. But I don't think it's a waste to hire a typesetter at all. They can just lickety-split make you perfect looking book without any of the potential pitfalls you could have of designing yourself. But if you're trying to save money, typesetting is probably a good option. Copy editing and proofreading, I'm a little hesitant to say you should do that yourself because you've written the book, and so all the mistakes, you're gonna not notice them when you read through again. So I highly encourage you to hire an editor. And there's three editing steps, at least. Do you have to hire 3 different editors? I would say ideally yes. I would say practically no. Like, I understand we don't all just have thousands and thousands of dollars to spend upfront on our books, but ideally yes, you want many eyes on your book, many professional eyes. I could say proofreading is probably the one I might consider skipping. Maybe. But if you can hire a proofreader, you should. Okay, so the 3 types of editors, you have developmental, you have copy editors, you have proofreaders. What is the difference? Many freelancers will tell you they can do all 3 in one round, and that is an utter lie. It's complete bullshit. Please don't trust those editors. Oh, friends. Okay, so developmental. They tell you big picture things like, this character's boring, you should cut this character. Or this feels like Insta love. Or this is problematic. That might fall into sensitivity reading. So if you can find a developmental editor who's also good at sensitivity reading, that's great. Or you might want to hire an additional person to sensitivity read. Anyway, I guess I'd consider sensitivity reading a subsection of developmental editing. Developmental editors will ask you to do big picture things. How is this different from a critique partner or a beta reader? The answer is you would hire someone who's worked on many different books and for their professional opinion. I guess I would say developmental editor potentially could be something you skip if you feel really good about your critique partners, especially if you have critique partners who've been published before and have had pretty good sales and they've worked on a lot of books. They give you really good critiques. And if you feel good about your book developmentally, don't self-publish if you haven't had like 20 people read your book. Like, you need lots of opinions, and so a developmental editor can give you a professional opinion, which is really helpful. Another thing with developmental editors versus critique partners is you're paying them to be more thorough. So they're going to comment every single thing they notice, whereas a critique partner probably is going to gloss over some of them. A developmental editor will note every single thing they notice that could be changed and improved. They'll also write you a long edit letter. This is important. If you have a developmental editor who doesn't do this, I personally wouldn't trust them. I wouldn't pay for that. Because, you read through a book, you have the line items, but you give a detailed, long, thorough edit letter that explains the big picture and what could be improved globally, not just locally. Like, this scene is boring, blah, blah, blah. An edit letter would say something like, your travel scenes tend to be drawn out and boring, so let's work on that. And of course, they'll probably be a little more professional and nice about it, hopefully. But, yeah, they're going to notice things like that. They might, because you're paying them to be honest, they might be a little more honest than your critique partners. So that is why you would pay for a developmental editor. This is the service I tend to see overcharged the most. So be wary and really choose someone who has professional experience. So that was developmental editor. Next we have copy editor. Why does the developmental editor and the copy editor have to be a different person? And the answer is you have to make the big developmental changes before you get it copy edited, because if you try to get it all at once, like, that means the sections that you had to rewrite aren't copy edited. You see why those are different things? So copy editing is things like you wrote the twice in a row. Let's get rid of that. You misspelled this word. This paragraph is clunky. This character had a different name up here. So it's like consistency errors, grammar punctuation errors, it's misspellings that they check for. And I think a lot of self-published authors think they can send off their manuscript to a copy editor and it will come back perfect. And then they can just boop, make it into a book. The thing about that is, so copy editors, a lot of what their job is to make sure that your story is consistent. So if you like gray spelled with an E, you have to spell it the same way throughout the manuscript. You can't have gray with an A. And if this character is Mary Ann, and sometimes their name has a hyphen and sometimes it doesn't, like, those are the kind of things. They have to be consistent. And let's say you have Mary Ann. So the copy editor isn't going to know which you prefer. Do you prefer Mary Ann with a hyphen or Mary Ann without a hyphen? They have to query you for that. Typically, so you send them, like, here's my manuscript. I'm done developmental editing. I'm not going to suddenly decide, oh, I rewrote this chapter. Here you go. Copy edit this again. Don't do that. They will charge you for that. Make sure it's final. So you give them your final baby. You're like, here it is. They sit and like decide every word that could potentially be hyphenated. They have to write that down on a style sheet and tell you why they chose to either hyphenate or not hyphenate. If there's a word with alternate spellings like flyers with an I, flyers with a Y, they have to write that down on a style sheet and tell you why they chose that, because it's not arbitrary. You are imposing a style. If you think flyers with an I is confusing and could be, if you're talking about like a poster flyer, I like flyers with a Y because it can't be confused with like flyers as in birds, like frequent flyers on airplanes. To me, I like having those two words distinct, so I like flyers with a Y when I'm talking about posters, okay? But if you look up in Merriam-Webster's, it will say flyers is the preferred spelling, but flyers with an I is an option. So, depending on what dictionary and style guide you've told your copy editor to use, they will go ahead and write that down and say, so they would say, okay, Audrey told me she wants me to use Merriam-Webster's and Chicago Manual of Style. And according to Merriam-Webster's, flyers with a Y is the first most commonly used spelling. So we're going to use that, and I'm going to record it in the style sheet so that Audrey can check it over later and make sure that she likes all the choices I made. Because more often than we think about, the words we use, the punctuation, the spelling, all of that is a choice. It's a stylistic choice. Even things you wouldn't think about, like hyphenation. Post-apocalyptic, I tend to hyphenate that. But if I was using the style guide at my press, they tend to not hyphenate like hardly anything. So it'd be post-apocalyptic, one big word, right? But if I was going to self-publish, I'd be like, no, stick a hyphen in there. I like hyphens. It's a stylistic choice. Either could be right depending on your style. So when you work with a copy editor, you have to give them guides. You have to give them, say, this is a style guide I use. Modern Language Association, which is like what in the US a lot of kids learn in high school. And then there's Chicago Manual of Style. There's AP, which is what like newspapers use. For 99% of people who want to appeal to a US audience, I would say use Chicago Manual of Style. Why? Because that's what all publishers in the US use. So if you want your book to be like other books in the US, just say Chicago Manual of Style, okay? That won't really serve you wrong. It's tried and true, people love it, Chicago Manual of Style. They use the Oxford comma, So don't worry about that. And then give them a dictionary. For most people in the US, I'd probably recommend Merriam-Webster's, or you could go with something college dictionary. And then there's the Random House dictionary. There's quite a few. You probably want to pick one in the US. You could probably specify Oxford English Dictionary and then say use US spellings if you're trying to appeal to a US market. So when a copy editor isn't sure about hyphenating something, they're going to look it up in your dictionary of choice. Is it hyphenated there? Oh, yes it is. I'm sticking a hyphen in. They write that on the style sheet. Copy editors should be thorough. They should be persnickety. They should catch every single comma splice in your manuscript. That is how detailed they should be. They shouldn't, this is why this has to be separate from developmental. Okay, so copy editors, they don't care about your characters. They assume, okay, that's all figured out. But they care about your commas a lot. And they will get them all correct. You're paying them to catch everything. And giving them that style guide, so do not put punctuation outside of quotes. Like in the US, it's a great day, she said. You have quotation, it's a great day, comma, then the quotation at the end, right? Because it looks weird. So that's just a US preference. But you don't want a copy editor freaking switching all your punctuation marks around, okay? So you need to make sure that you're on the same page. If they seem like weirded out by the fact that you need them to follow a specific dictionary or style guide, they aren't taking this seriously enough. You are because if they don't get the punctuation right, like that's it. This is your so you have the proofreader later, and their job is also to catch some of this stuff. But this is your first pass, and especially if you decide not to go with a proofreader, that's it. It's going to be in your printed book. That's a big deal. Because as a reader, finding lots of errors everywhere, that is so distracting. I feel like a lot of self-published authors, especially if you're self-publishing YA, a lot of your audience is actually other adults. Why do I say that? Because distribution to libraries is a lot harder in the self-publishing model. Libraries don't tend to buy a ton of self-published books. So unless you make it really big, your book probably isn't going to be in libraries. And I'll just tell you from my experience as a teen, the only books I read were the ones in my school's library. That was it. I didn't go to the library in my hometown. I didn't go to the college library. I didn't go to bookstores. I was kind of poor. I didn't buy books. I just read what was in the library. I also didn't have a Kindle. And teens tend to not have Kindles. They just don't. A lot of self-published people, even if you're writing YA, adults read YA. They're I don't remember the statistic, but either half or even a majority of YA readers are adult. But because you have an adult audience, they're going to be even pickier about your punctuation. And even if they're not good at punctuation, it's going to throw off their reading experience, because punctuation, good punctuation, good form, all of that stuff copy editors check for, all of that helps with ease of reading. It's there for a reason, and it helps readers go through your story effortlessly without having to trip on your extra commas, right? They don't have to trip on your hyphen instead of an em dash, okay? So if you have a copy editor who doesn't take that seriously, who refuses to give you a style sheet or doesn't seem to know what a style sheet is, and they are not used to following certain dictionaries and they just kind of use their own arbitrary rules, that's the red flags everywhere, okay? I'm gonna leave lots of links below of where to find some proofreaders, but you always have to do your own research. Freelancers should be willing to give you a sample edit. Typesetters can give you sample pages of what their layout's gonna look like, and cover designers you can usually see past covers they've done. But every single freelancer needs to be able to give you a little bit of a taste for what they're editing, or whatever they're trying to do. It's going to give you a taste for their style. So red flag if they aren't willing to do that. So you should be able to give them, I'd say probably 10 pages, honestly. That gives you enough where you can see that they're consistent, that they aren't introducing errors, that they're following your style guide. And they have to make a style sheet for all the words they find you can make arbitrary decisions about. They have to justify to you why they're making that decision. Sometimes it's just oh, I just picked this, but just say that in the style sheet so you as the author can look at the style sheet, say, no, I don't like that choice, make it this way instead, and they can change it in the manuscript for you. Copy editors should know what an en dash is. If they don't hire them. This is gonna be my snobbiest video yet. Snobbiest video yet. I feel like I was getting very passionate, and then my battery died, so I had to just and then come back to some dishes. I think my main point there was that copy editors have certain deliverables. One of those deliverables should be a style sheet. I'm gonna link below to a really cool blog post that a freelance editor who frequently works with self-published authors wrote. And she explains style sheets and why they're handy. And you're probably asking yourself, Audrey, why does this matter, right? This seems like the nerdiest thing I've ever heard of. Like I kind of got to earlier, it helps with readability to have a professionally copy-edited book. It just reads better, it looks better, and readers do notice it. And again, if you're having mainly an adult audience with self-publishing, you're gonna want to especially be thoughtful about punctuation, because we do notice these things. You might not be a punctuation aficionado, but your readers might be. And you never know who you'll prevent from enjoying your book if you don't get it professionally copy edited. So thinking about it, I really think copy editing is the most vital service you can get. And that's because it really is specialized knowledge. You really do have to pay to get someone who is going to be good at this, because everyone thinks they're good at punctuation. But very few people actually know what an en dash is. I haven't met anyone outside of publishing who knew what an en dash was. Okay, so there are these like formatting things and rules, and it really is specialized knowledge. So with enough reader feedback, you can sort of get a sense for developmental things, but copy editing, you really do need a professional, in my opinion. Going back to the beginning, we had the manuscripts done, okay? And then we had developmental editing if needed. We had copy editing, right? So that's getting the words as polished as can be. What's next? The answer is typesetting. I'm planning on doing a whole series on typesetting, but here's what it is. It's making a book look pretty, the text inside, okay? So it distinguishes a book from a printed out Word document. You can't typeset in Word. You can't. Also, formatting is not typesetting. Formatting, you format ebooks. You do not format text. You typeset text. There are very specific rules. Here's a good example. The word analysis. You want to be careful where you break that word. So breaking a word, like at the end of a line of text, and then you have a hyphen, and the rest of the words on the next line, right? Yeah, we're all familiar with this, right? Where the dictionary says to break this, you can break it in different places. If you look on, I'll show a screenshot of this, but on Merriam-Webster, the little dots between the syllables, that's telling you where you can break the word. One place you can break the word technically is after the L, right? So it'll be anal, and then cis. That's bad for two reasons. One, you probably don't want anal. I wouldn't. Like, I'd prefer to not have the word right there. And then YSIS. It doesn't, I look at that, I'm like, ugh, it's just gross, okay? So you would want to break that word somewhere else. I usually like to just put the Y up there, anale, and then have cis. Good places to break words are like gerunds. So you have swim, ming, right? Ing is obviously part of another word. Like, it fits together, and you honestly, as you read, we're all used to doing this. We just whoop, on to the next line, and we can just deal with it. This is the kind of thing typesetters watch out for. And like I said, I'm doing a detailed video series on how to typeset your own book if you so choose. But one of the things you're going to be doing is checking line breaks. Another thing is readability. So how your book is typeset really helps enhance readability. You're obviously not going to put your book in Comic Sans, and yeah, you're going to pick a nice readable format. You're going to pick a serif font, for goodness sake, please pick a serif font. So typesetting essentially It's laying out the interior design of your book, how it looks on the inside. And typesetting is so important. And it's the number one thing that I see in self-published books that really distinguishes them, for me, from traditionally published books. I'm going to link below to a really great video that, I'm not remembering her real name, but her channel is Kitten Chronicles, and she self-published Alethea. I don't know, I think her formatting is pretty good, and she taught herself how to do it. So she, I think, really took, you can have quibbles about her design, but she made stylistic choices. She didn't just stick a Word document into KDP and called it good. She sat and designed each page. So that you can respect. Typesetting is so important. It shows that you care how your book looks, and caring how your book looks is a part of caring about your reader experience. If your book is hard, like physically hard on the eyes to read, that is such a deterrent. And a big thing with books is, Instagram, you have a nice cover. If you have beautiful pages, your book is going to be that much more Instagrammable. Yes, typesetting matters, and you should either learn how to typeset or hire a professional. I don't think either way could serve you wrong. It depends on your needs and your budget. So then you've typeset the book, and you have these nice PDF pages, and these are basically print-ready files. But there's another step, and that's proofreading. So proofreading is either done by you or a freelancer, obviously, but you should definitely do it. It's not a step you should skip. You're probably going to want to read during during copy edits. You're going to be answering queries. You're going to read over sentences again as you look over the notes and what they've changed. And you'll want to read it over during proofreading as well. But if you hire a proofreader, they might have queries too. Make sure to give them the style sheet that your copy editor created. So they will have this style sheet, and it says, let's say the copy editor missed that we were putting a hyphen in post-apocalyptic, and then they get the book and see oh, it's post-apocalyptic, no hyphen here, but then it has a hyphen over here on page whatever. They can look at the style sheet and know which one it's supposed to be. You can add whatever you want to the style sheet, so I personally would add gray with an E, because it looks a bajillion times prettier. And I will never stop believing that. Give the proofreader your proofs. The big difference here between proofreading and copy editing is the proof part. Proofreading, okay? So typesetters typeset your book, and what they create at the end product is proofs. So these are print-ready files, they're typeset, they're pretty, they look like a book. And then, so your proofreader is going to check a few things. They're checking to, obviously they're another line of defense, they're going to check for punctuation and grammar errors, but I would say the big thing with proofreading is they're checking formatting. Maybe somehow during the typesetting process, some italics got stripped out. That's bad. So you have this album title here and it's not italic, and part of your style is you want it italic. Your proofreader can note that and make sure it gets italic in the final version. Your proofreader also is checking line breaks. So your typesetter, if you're doing it, you'll probably check line breaks as well. But again, it's a second check because you're doing this quickly probably, and we're human. Okay, so you have the typesetter checking line breaks, make sure you don't have any anal hyphens in there. As you do. Making sure things like, okay, we have chapter headings, right? Are all the chapter headings in the same font? That's probably important. Do your running heads match the table of contents? If you have one, that's probably important. Do your baselines. So baseline is the last line of text on your page, and they're always supposed to line up. And they can go long or short. But they have to line up because it just looks weird if they don't. Obviously exceptions like at the end of a chapter, so the chapter ends here and that's fine. But they're checking things like that. So they're making sure it all looks even and good on the page. And they're making sure everything's formatted, making sure your pages are in order, things like that you wouldn't think you would have to check for, but you absolutely do have to check for. I mean, if you have your page numbers messed up, it looks really bad. So proofreaders are kind of your last line of defense. It's the last chance to check everything. And they can check things that copy editors can't. So For instance, if you have a table of contents, you have to have page numbers, right? So copy editors can't check for page numbers because they don't know how it's going to be typeset. So usually typesetters don't fill these in. Proofreader goes ahead and fills in all the page numbers. So you have chapter 1 on this page and chapter 2 on this page. So they can check for things that copy editors can't because they don't have the final pretty looking thing. Proofreaders also, they make less changes than copy editors would because they're trying to make as few changes as possible. Every time you change after proofs, after your book is typeset, sometimes it means that like if you add too much text, it reflows the whole book and then suddenly your table of contents is wrong. So proofreaders only correct genuine like mistakes. They don't like make words sound prettier. They don't correct anything that isn't technically wrong, whereas copy editors will. Copy editors are trying to make your prose sound as spiffy as possible. Okay, so we went through the round. Just to recap here. Okay, so you've got your book. You've written a beautiful book. You've gone through several rounds of revision. First is developmental editing. Depending on how strong of a writer you are and how good you feel about your story, you might just want to do critique partners, or you might want to hire a developmental editor to help you get your story as strong as possible. And also just to get the experience of working with an editor. It certainly is its own unique experience. Separate from critique partners, you don't have to give feedback back to the editor, and the editor is going to give you more detailed feedback than a critique partner ever would. So they're going to give you the feedback that takes them a long time to type and that is boring to type and that someone you weren't paying wouldn't do for you. And then we have copy editing. So that is the line by line stuff. Checking that you don't have duplicated words, making sure you're not misspelling things, getting rid of commas places. All of that stuff is what a copy editor should do. Your copy editor should make you a style sheet. Okay, you deserve a style sheet. It means they're doing their job. They're making sure that every time a word is hyphenated, it's hyphenated that way throughout the entire manuscript. It's important. And when you're hiring a copy editor, make sure to give them a dictionary to use and a style manual to use. My tried and true picks would be Merriam-Webster's and Chicago Manual Style. That is what like 95% of American publishers will use, okay? So you'll be using those same standards. And then any house style things, like house style is like styles that kind of break whatever dictionary and style guide you used. So like say you like gray with an E rather than an A, you could put that and tell the copy editor that. Copy editors should be good. They should catch everything. Don't settle for less. Don't settle for having to fix their mistakes because they should be better at this than you are. And then we have the typesetters. So typesetters format your book and make print-ready files. They stick your text in whatever trim size you're going with. They make it pretty. They check line breaks. They do fun little chapter drop things like that. Proofreaders read proofs. Proofs are what typesetters make. Okay, so proofreaders, again, check line breaks, again, check punctuation and grammar, but they only make vital changes. They'll also check formatting and make sure everything that's italic should be italic, and they make sure like chapter headings look the same. They make sure baselines line up. That's what they do. And it's like the last line of defense before your book is published. Okay? And whether or not you decide to do any of these yourself, you should go through all of these steps. They're very, very important. What this video is really about for me is giving self-published authors the knowledge and information they need to make informed decisions about freelancing. Let's say you have a house and you want to replace your windows. You get bids. You get people who come to your house, like measure things and tell you things about your house, and you probably want to have an informed opinion. You want to know different brands of windows. You want to know what is a reasonable price. You want to get different contractors to come out and give you estimates. You want to do the same thing for your self-published book. One of the most fun things that you can get with working with freelancers is you can find the copy editor who is the best at doing what you need them to do and pick that person. Self-published authors, I think the biggest disconnect, it isn't effort and it isn't quality of writing. I feel like self-published authors really do put a lot of time and effort into their writing itself. it really is the services part, because publishers do so much. A lot happens in that time. Manuscript is always through some stage. I think self-publishers should have access to those same services. Please like, subscribe, comment, and hit the bell thing. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.